Solved and unsolved. Here's a roundup of the most sinister, heart-wrenching crimes each year going back to the end of the 20th century. Hae-Min Lee was an 18-year-old high school student when her body was discovered in Leakin Park in her hometown of Baltimore, Maryland on February 9, 1999. She appeared to have been strangled. The prime suspect was her ex-boyfriend, Adnan Syed. He was tried and found guilty of her murder. But the circumstances surrounding Lee's murder have been hotly debated ever since the 2014 release of the hit podcast Serial. The series raised questions about Syed's conviction, which rested upon the shaky testimony of his friend Jay Wilds. Biography states, "Thanks to the worldwide popularity of Serial, Syed's case has captured public interest and spawned a plethora of media projects. In an unexpected twist, Syed was released from prison and transferred to home detention on September 19, 2022, after a judge vacated his conviction. He cited the prosecution's failure to turn over evidence to the defense that would have proved to Syed's benefit."
Why did they sit on this information? Why wasn't this disclosed? Why wasn't it discovered? Because the moment that we discovered it, we turned it over.
Syed is awaiting a decision on whether he faces a new trial or full dismissal. An unlikely series of events led to the arrest of the killer of Dariusz Januszewski, a businessman from Wrocław, Poland. In December 2000, Januszewski's body was discovered in a lake by some fishermen. He was found with a rope around his neck and his body bore marks of torture. He'd been reported missing a week earlier. At the time, police found very little evidence to lead them to the killer. 6 months into the investigation, detectives decided the case was hopeless and shelved it. Years later, cops got a tip about a 2003 pulp novel titled Amok by author Christian Bala.
"We have a suspect, a crime writer."
The story's about a murder that's uncannily similar to that of Januszewski. According to The Guardian, police uncovered evidence that Bala had known the dead man, had telephoned him around the time of his disappearance, and had then sold the dead man's mobile phone on the internet within days of the murder. In 2007, Bala was found guilty of Januszewski's murder and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Armand Mavis came to the attention of police in 2002 when they were directed to online posts soliciting young men willing to be eaten. At Mavis' farmhouse outside the German city of Dresden, cops found a videotape of the killing of Bernd Brandes, a Berlin-based computer developer whose fantasy reportedly complemented Mavis. His remains were found in Mavis' garden. The trial was a shocker. Mavis was open about his crimes and seemed to enjoy all the attention. According to The Guardian, he admitted to cooking pieces of Brandes' body with olive oil and garlic and washed it down with a bottle of South African red.
"I killed a man, slaughtered him and ate him. Since then, he is always with me."
Mavis was initially sentenced to just 8 years for manslaughter, but he was retried and found guilty of murder. Then there was the creepy revelation that Mavis belonged to a wider network of cannibals. According to The Guardian, an investigator testified that we were talking about dentists, teachers, cooks, government officials, and handymen. John and Anne Darwin were an average middle-aged couple from the north of England, and John was an avid canoeist. In March 2002, he was reported missing on a canoe trip. Despite a large-scale search by the police and the Coast Guard, his body was never found. A death certificate was issued the following year, leaving Anne and her 2 sons grief-stricken.
Well, the emotions were genuine emotions, but for the wrong reasons.
But then, 5 years after what appeared to have been a tragic boating accident, the BBC reported that John Darwin walked into a London police station, claiming he had amnesia and was reunited with his stunned sons. As unbelievable as John Darwin's story already was, it unraveled spectacularly when a photo emerged, taken a year earlier, of John and Anne with a real estate agent in Panama. The couple had colluded on a massive life insurance claim worth hundreds of thousands of British pounds. They deceived everyone, including their own sons, into believing John was dead. Both received hefty prison sentences and the universal disdain of the British press. Until August 28, 2003, 46-year-old Brian Wells was your unassuming pizza delivery guy. But on that day, Wells robbed a bank in a suburb of Erie, Pennsylvania. He wore a white t-shirt that bulged noticeably at the front. In one hand, he carried a canvas bag, in the other, a cane, which police later recognized was a homemade shotgun. To top it all off, he sucked on a lollipop. Wells informed the teller that he had a bomb fitted around his neck and demanded $250,000.
Why or how could an individual who knew they had a live device around their neck be so calm?
She gave him all the cash he had access to, far less than Wells demanded, and he left. He was quickly apprehended, but while in custody, the device attached to Wells began to beep. The bomb was real, and someone else had detonated it. When it went off, Wells was killed. Before he died, Wells claimed someone called him out on a fake pizza delivery, then forced him at gunpoint to wear a bomb and rob the bank. In 2004, a 14-year-old British boy known to the media by the pseudonym John posed online as a female British spy. According to The Independent, he then groomed a 16-year-old boy, known only by the pseudonym Mark, with an elaborate matrix of deceit involving 6 fictional characters in an MSN chat room and correspondence totaling 58,000 lines of text. The purpose of the deception? John had planned his own murder and wanted Mark to carry it out. Online, John convinced Mark that the target, John himself, was suffering from a brain tumor and that the hit would lead to a James Bond-like life full of money, sex, and a job spying for the British Secret Service. Mark was convinced. He stabbed John twice before calling the police and claiming that an unknown assailant had attacked his friend. Ultimately, John survived the attack he had orchestrated.
10 days later, Mark revealed to police that he was an agent for the British Secret Service. Codename 47695.
Mark didn't realize John was behind the scheme or that the other characters were made up until he heard it in court the following year. At the trial, John pled guilty to incitement to murder and perverting the course of justice. 25-year-old Janet Abaroa was married to sportswear salesman and soccer fan Raven Abaroa. She was pregnant with the couple's second child when her husband came home to find her stabbed to death. There were no signs of a robbery, and their 6-month-old son, Caden, was unharmed. Raven told police he'd been at an indoor soccer game at the time of the murder, which he said occurred while his wife was getting ready for bed. For 5 years, Raven's version of events held up until a new investigation had a breakthrough. The fact that Janet's contact lenses were not in their case indicated she had not been going to bed at all, which blew Raven's account wide open. Then there was the $500,000 life insurance policy he had taken out on Janet shortly before her death.
Is he capable of doing that, doing it for the insurance money?
Absolutely.
In 2013, after a mistrial, Raven Abaroa pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter. He has since been released from prison. In April 2006, a 12-year-old Canadian girl named Jasmine Richardson murdered her mother, father, and 8-year-old brother, but she didn't do it alone. She planned the killings with her boyfriend, 23-year-old Jeremy Steinke. Her parents didn't approve of him, so they had to go. Steinke stabbed the parents, and Jasmine slit her little brother's throat. She didn't want him growing up an orphan. Many news outlets have reported the attack as a copycat because Richardson and Steinke had recently seen the 1994 movie Natural Born Killers. But can a film alone really elicit such real-world violence in its audience? Richardson is now out of prison while Steinke is serving a life sentence. On May 3, 2007, British 3-year-old Madeleine McCann was taken from her bed in a Portuguese holiday resort while her parents had dinner at a late-night tapas bar. The hunt for the missing toddler soon became a full-blown media circus. There have been more than 9,000 sightings of Madeleine since her disappearance, and dozens of suspects had hit the front pages. That includes her own parents, who were considered prime suspects for a time. McCann has never been found. However, in 2020, Christian Bruckner, a drifter who was known to have been in the area at the time of the girl's disappearance, was named a strong suspect. And in May 2022, there were developments in the case that involved Bruckner. German prosecutor Hans Christian Wolters commented,
"But we have enough evidence to say our suspect killed Madeleine McCann."
The investigation remains open. In 2008, it was discovered that Josef Fritzl, a married father from Amstetten in Lower Austria, had kept a sex slave locked in the windowless basement of his family home for 24 years. The victim was his own daughter Elizabeth, whom Fritzl had first entrapped at age 18. He asked her to help him fit a door in the very basement that would become her prison. He'd been planning and constructing the prison for years by using his contacts in the construction industry. Fritzl covered up his daughter's disappearance by telling his wife their daughter had run off to join a cult. Over the course of thousands of daily sexual assaults, Fritzl repeatedly impregnated his daughter. She gave birth in the basement alone 7 times.
Fritzl has given his daughter a book on childbirth, a towel, a pair of scissors, and a couple of nappies.
6 of the children survived. Elizabeth raised 3 of them in the basement, while Fritzl and his wife raised the other 3 in their home after he told her they were foundlings. Fritzl was finally apprehended after taking one of the imprisoned kids to the emergency room, where doctors alerted the authorities. The story of teens Viktor Shayenko and Igor Shaprunyak, known as the Hammer Maniacs, shook their native Ukraine when it came out in the late 2000s, but even today, it's barely known outside their homeland. In 2007, the 19-year-olds began a series of brutal slayings, attacking their unsuspecting victims with claw hammers. The teens' first victim was an elderly woman, their second, a man sleeping on a bench. They struck twice more the following week and continued their killing spree until the number of victims reached 21 over the the course of just 3 months. The killers were apprehended after one of their targets, a teenage boy, escaped from the attack in which his friend was murdered. After being accused of the killing himself, he gave descriptions of assailants that helped bring them to justice. The pair made a habit of recording and taking photographs of their slayings, some of which were leaked to the internet. Their recordings were used as evidence against them in their 2009 trial. They were sentenced to life in prison. In November 2010, 28-year-old Annie Hindacha was on her honeymoon in Cape Town, South Africa, with their new husband, Sriyan Dewani. The couple were in a taxi on the way to their hotel when they were carjacked at gunpoint. Dewani was released unharmed, but Hindacha's body was found days later in the backseat of the abandoned taxi. She'd been shot through the neck. The investigators took so many turns that many still question the official story. 3 suspects were arrested early on. They claimed Hindacha's husband was the brains behind the carjacking and robbery. As the men in custody tried to leverage the idea of Dewani's involvement, details of his closet bisexuality were made public as a possible motive. After a prolonged extradition battle, Dewani's trial was ultimately thrown out due to lack of evidence, but the 3 killers went to prison. Xavier Dupont de Ligonnès was, or perhaps is, descended from French aristocracy. Xavier and his wife Agnès, who lived in Nantes, France, had 4 kids, 3 boys and a girl aged between 13 and 21. In November 2011, the whole family went missing without a trace, their bank accounts closed. Left behind was a single letter from Xavier revealing that he was a U.S. secret agent forced to enter witness protection. The children's schools had been notified that the family was moving to Australia. But a week later, the bodies of Agnès and the children were found buried in the family's backyard, along with those of their 2 Labradors. They had all been shot twice in the head. A manhunt for Xavier ensued. It's suspected that he massacred his family in reaction to their impending bankruptcy. Although he left a paper trail of movements across France in the wake of the murders, Xavier has never been found. To this day, he remains one of France's most wanted criminals. Jimmy Savile, a children's entertainer knighted by the Queen who spent Christmases with former Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, was a beloved fixture on British television. Savile was known for his outlandish sportswear, glasses, and prop cigar. He was also famous for his philanthropy, which was interwoven into shows like Jim'll Fix It, where kids were encouraged to write in and have their wishes granted.
20,000 letters a week. If you misbehave at the BBC, they put you on opening the Jim'll Fix It mail.
When Savile died at age 84 in October 2011, his funeral was attended by hundreds of fans and famous friends. But his image faded in the following months as it came out that Savile was under investigation for child abuse.
Well, I'd long considered him, as many of my colleagues did, as a man with a severe personality disorder.
As allegations came to light throughout 2012, it became clear that Savile was a serial abuser who used his fame and the blind eye of those around him to take advantage of vulnerable women and children. The abuse occurred over 6 decades, with some of Savile's victims as young as 2. In 2014, it was revealed that Savile sexually assaulted staff and patients at 28 NHS hospitals, ranging from the age of 5 to 75. Between 2002 and 2004, 3 young women in Cleveland, Ohio went missing. The first, 21-year-old Michelle Knight, went missing in 2002. The following year, 16-year-old Burger King worker Amanda Berry disappeared. In 2004, another teenager vanished without a trace, 14-year-old Georgina De Jesus. All 3 seemed to disappear into thin air, and authorities assumed the 2 teenagers had been killed. But in 2013, the women were found. They'd been held captive in a Cleveland house for a decade. Then, Amanda Berry, left alone by her captors, attempted to escape and drew the attention of a neighbor who called the police.
I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years and I'm here, I'm free now.
3 men were arrested. The first to be publicly named was Ariel Castro. He received life plus 1,000 years for the abduction of the 3 women, all of whom testified against him. Happily, all 3 women were reunited with their families. A relative of Georgina De Jesus told the BBC, "We were living every day in the hope she would come home, and she did." In 2014, the chilling influence of the long-armed internet phantasm known as Slender Man raised alarm bells for parents around the world. It was a shocking reminder of the dangers of unsupervised web access for children.
He could exploit these tendrils from his back and strangle his victims.
In May of that year, 3 young girls had a birthday sleepover that would end in violence. The 3 went into the woods, where 12-year-olds Morgan Gazer and Anissa Weyer attacked their school friend Peyton Leitner with a knife, stabbing her 19 times before they left her to die. Fortunately, the victims survived after drawing the attention of a passing cyclist. As details emerged, it became clear that the 2 young girls had come across the fictional Slender Man on social media and attempted to kill Leitner to please him. According to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Gazer's attorney argued in court that Gazer believes she had to kill or she would be killed herself by the fictional internet character. The girls were charged with attempted first-degree intentional homicide. On Valentine's Day 2013, model and law school graduate Riva Steenkamp was shot 4 times through the bathroom door by her partner, South African Olympian and Paralympian Oscar Pistorius. The world press was captivated. Pistorius admitted to the shooting but claimed he thought an intruder had broken in and was hiding in the bathroom. Pistorius' version of events seemed implausible, but his courtroom demeanor, including bouts of retching when images of the murder scene were shown, seemed to swing the public opinion in his favor. Although the prosecution described his testimony as a snowball of lies, Pistorius was found guilty of culpable homicide instead of murder and given a 6-year prison sentence. The result surprised and upset many, including legal experts and advocates against sexual assault and domestic violence in South Africa. Prosecutors want a retrial, and this time Pistorius was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to 13 years and 5 months behind bars. The murder of internet star Christina Grimmie caused shockwaves beyond her dedicated follower base and launched scores of think pieces about the dangers of viral stardom. The story of Grimmie's rise to fame is a snapshot of her age. According to Time, age 15 in 2009, Grimmie uploaded one of her first tracks to YouTube, a cover of Party in the USA by Miley Cyrus. It went viral. In 2011, she released her first EP, then moved to Los Angeles. In 2014, she came third in the US TV talent show The Voice, extending her popularity beyond her millions of subscribers. On June 10, 2016, Grimmie was attending a meet and greet with fans following a show in Orlando, Florida. One of the attendants, a 27-year-old man from nearby St. Petersburg, showed up armed with 2 guns. As Grimmie approached, he shot her 3 times before turning the gun on himself. "We will get answers. We will get answers. We will have to wait patiently for that." Those are the words of Anna Williams, whose teenage daughter, Abby, was found alongside her friend Libby German near Monon High Bridge at Deer Creek, Indiana. The date was February 14, 2017. The girls had been brutally murdered. The day before, the 2 friends had been dropped off to do some hiking. They were expected to meet German's grandfather at a nearby parking lot around 3:15 p.m. When they didn't show, the alarm was raised. Thousands of locals joined the search before the bodies were discovered.
Because this is a classic example and a clear example that evil lives amongst us.
Typical teenagers, the girls posted photos of themselves to social media during their hike. But more chilling was what investigators later discovered on German's cell phone: 2 images of a man who had crossed the same bridge the girls had, a short audio file of presumably the same man speaking the words "down the hill," and a few seconds of footage. On October 31, 2022, the Indiana State Police held a press conference announcing the arrest of Richard M. Allen, a resident of Delphi, CNN reported. He pled not guilty at an initial hearing. Many questions are still left unanswered, as Superintendent Doug Carter explained. This investigation is far from complete, and we will not jeopardize its integrity by releasing or discussing documents or information before the appropriate time. Between 1976 and 1986, Californians were terrorized by crime sprees which each earned their own nicknames. There was the Night Stalker, the East Area Rapist, and the Visalia Ransacker.
He raped over 50 women in California and killed 10 people, and he's never been caught.
Decades later, investigators, aided by advances in both technique and technology, realized the evidence all led to the same man, Joseph James DeAngelo, known today as the Golden State Killer. The story of his arrest and the litany of violent attacks, sexual assaults, and murders demonstrates how far criminal investigation has come in recent years, and DeAngelo's capture signals new hope for cold cases. Investigators began to piece together the links between DeAngelo's crimes in the early 2000s, but it took until 2018 for him to be apprehended. Ultimately, police followed a DNA trail using information gleaned from a genealogy website. Once captured, DeAngelo made a deal to avoid the death penalty. He admitted to 13 murders, plus a number of sexual assaults, robberies, and other crimes. Movie mogul Harvey Weinstein's production company has been responsible for some of the best love films in American cinema, but to insiders, he was known as a nasty character, a bully who pressured those around him into giving into his demands.
I knew he was a dangerous character, but I knew also that he was at the epicenter of where I wanted to be.
His predatory behavior toward women in the industry was an open secret, according to film producer Emily Bast. Still, it was not until the late 2010s that the revelation that Weinstein was a compulsive sex offender became common knowledge outside Hollywood. In October 2017, the New York Times ran the stories of 13 women Weinstein had sexually abused, along with the revelation that he'd systematically paid off accusers for years. Since then, more than 90 women have come forward, and the Me Too movement has begun to empower women faced with abuse in the workplace. In 2019, Weinstein was finally brought to trial, and in 2020, he was sentenced to 23 years in prison for rape. The city of Manchester in the north of England is known for its soccer teams, its rich musical legacy, and its vibrant gay scene. Manchester's Canal Street, a destination for gay clubbing, was known for its openness and inclusivity until the crimes of one city resident came to light. In 2018, then 34-year-old Reynard Sanaga was charged with raping 12 men. Sanaga targeted drunk men, lacing their drinks with GHB. As the investigation wore on, police realized he may have committed hundreds of rapes going as far back as 2005. In fact, the estimate now stands at 206.
Probably anywhere in the world is concerned, he's probably the most prolific rapist that's come through the courts.
Sanaga filmed many of the assaults, and the footage was used as evidence in his 2020 trial. According to the Manchester Evening News, the judge described Sanaga as a highly dangerous, cunning, and deceitful individual who will never be safe to be released. He'll serve a minimum of 40 years in prison. On June 7, 2021, 911 got a call from prominent attorney Alex Murdaugh. He found his wife Maggie and their 22-year-old son Paul shot to death at their hunting lodge in Islandton, South Carolina. Initially, the police discovered that Paul was awaiting trial for a boat crash that took the life of a 19-year-old woman. He'd been boating under the influence. Then, a few days after the murders, Alex's brothers went on Good Morning America, claiming someone had been threatening Paul online. The implication was that Alex had nothing to do with the deaths. Then, on September 4, 2021, Alex survived a gunshot to the head. While recovering, he resigned from his law firm and commented, "I am immensely sorry to everyone I've hurt, including my family, friends, and colleagues." A few days earlier, Alex's colleagues at the law firm had confronted him about a hefty sum of missing money. Apparently suffering from severe depression and an opioid addiction, he hired a man to kill him so his surviving son could cash in on $10 million in life insurance. With a warrant out for his arrest, Alex turned himself in. He was charged with insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and filing a false police report. And on July 14, 2022, he was indicted for the murder of his wife and son. In May 2021, Caroline Crouch, age 19, was found dead inside her Athens, Greece home with her baby daughter crying next to her body. The family dog Roxy had been hung to death. Crouch's husband, 33-year-old chopper pilot Babis Ananostopoulos, wept, claiming he and his family were victims of a botched robbery. Ananostopoulos was immediately all over the news. As a grieving but still photogenic husband, he earned the public sympathy. But the truth behind Crouch and Roxy's tragic deaths was much darker than a robbery gone wrong. In fact, it was Ananostopoulos who had strangled his wife to death. He'd killed Roxy to make his story more convincing. But Crouch's diary entries revealed that she'd been trying to end the abusive relationship and leave with their baby girl. In May 2022, Ananostopoulos was sentenced to life in prison for murdering his wife, with an additional 10 years for killing Roxy. Crouch's father said, "I am further gratified to know that he will serve his time in Korydallos prison, the toughest prison in Greece, which has one of the worst prison systems in Europe." If you or someone you know has been a victim of sexual assault, help is available. Visit the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network website or contact RAIN's National Helpline at 1-800-656-HOPE 4673.